Monica Bullock, welcome back to Behind the Fiction.
Thank you.
We're laughing because we had a little bit of a kerfluffle with the earlier introduction. I was flashing back on an old podcast that I had done. You may remember that Monica and I spoke maybe 6 weeks or so ago, and we had some technical difficulties. Monica is now the proud recipient of high-speed internet to her ranch, and we are rolling now.
To the office.
Oh,
not
to the office. Okay, all right. Well, we're still rolling, so we're happy about that.
Yes, the ranch will never get internet. We're too far out there.
Well, let's talk today about the Hauntings of Sugar Hill. This was a series of 4 books, I think, that you had written. 5 books that you'd written a few years ago that we are publishing today.
Yes.
And, we're excited to be publishing these. And can you tell listeners a little bit about the series? Because this is something it's not too far different than what you normally do, but it's a little bit different.
It is a little bit different. And if I was to be asked how to describe the series without getting in trouble with some kind of trademark, I would say Gone with the Wind, but with ghosts. It's supernatural suspense meets Southern Gothic. And it starts in a time of history that's really not spoken about very much, and that's left-hand marriages that happened a lot in the South.
All right. Now, you're going to have to enlighten me. What is a left-hand marriage?
Okay. Well, in the 18th century, and you got to forgive me, I'm an archaeology major, so that's where a lot of my books, I just love history. But in the South and in other parts of the country, but mostly the South in the 18th century, there was a practice called placage. And that's where you could have, if you were a wealthy man, you could have a left-hand wife and a right-hand wife. And the right-hand wife was your white wife. She's the one you walked out, and she was the official wife. But you could, if you could afford to purchase, and it sounds terrible, a biracial wife, then she was your left-hand wife. And you had children with her. You had 2 separate homes. Oftentimes, they'd build plantations for these left-hand wives. There was a whole society for these women. They shopped in their own stores. They had their own parts of town. Some had their own towns. If you've ever been to New Orleans and you've been to Rampart Street, then you're walking the miles where those women lived. And so I took that story, and that was the premise of it.
Fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about your love of history and how you weave it into everything that you do, because a lot of your stories, I mean, and this one as well, there's a modern day component and a historical component.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. I love that. Growing up, I used to love those time travel shows like The Two Worlds of Jenny Logan, and the ones where they'd go back in time, somewhere in time, with Christopher Reeves and Jane Seymour.
Oh,
that is me. That is what I write. And I love the two. I've had an editor tell me, you're making it difficult on yourself having these 2 plot lines going, but that's the story. I love the history. I've always been excited about history, about especially the places that I've been. I've been fortunate enough to have lived around the country and always been drawn to those historical places. And you think about the people that lived there and what they were like and how they lived and who they loved, and they're the ghosts of my heart, and they deserve to have their story told, even if it's a fictional version of it.
And so how much actual research do you do before you start digging into this? Or is this information that you have because of your background and your interest in history?
Well, with the Sugar Hill series, I actually did quite a bit of research, a few months of research, but I was reading this information while writing on another book. So don't get the idea I was on the island somewhere like Hemingway.
Research Island, yeah.
Yeah. But as I went researching and reading and learning more, I even went to New Orleans on several occasions and walked those streets, saw those places. So that one and the Egyptian one, which we'll talk about later, those are ones that I've spent a considerable amount, but they were all my life, interested in those particular subjects.
And so how did, or did the idea of Southern history, is that like a first love of yours as opposed to just like world history, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
Southern history is, it is, it is a love of mine. Not because I romanticize the horribleness of slavery or any of the other things that the South stood for, but I realized in the midst of all of that, there were people that loved and lived and believed, maybe not like we do, but they loved and lived, and they deserve to have their stories told. They deserve to be remembered. Black, white, Creole, Cajun. There's so many races and groups of people, and like the Pelican girls, you know, the little French girls that were sent over here to marry the colonists. I mean, there's all kinds of people that have been forgotten by history. And I feel like with my ghost stories, I can bring them back to life. And people can get to know that, you know?
And I have to say that it has to be more fun to read history through a fictional lens than a history book.
I would think so. I would think so. I tend to scan. I read a lot. And I learned at a very early age through one year we did 100 books. It was called 100 Books for the Summer. And that was the year that I read 100 books. And I realized I could scan, and I got better at reading and scanning. If it's nonfiction, I'm scanning that sucker. But if it's fiction, I'm going to read it again and again and again. So, you know, I hope that my readers feel the same way.
All right. Now, I have one question about the Sugar Hill series, and that is the pronunciation of your protagonist, her last name.
Okay. Suzanne.
Avery?
Dufresne. It's Dufresne.
Okay. Dufresne. Okay. All right. Because we were talking about the series on the weekly show that we do that talks about the books that were coming up, and it's like, I'm pretty sure I'm getting this one wrong. And I wasn't even close.
And in some parts, it's Dufresne. So it's just one of those names that I had a lot of fun with. And it was regional. I do use a lot of regional names, so people from this area would recognize that the Dufresne family is present, you know. So I'm not stealing people's names. I'm using names that are in the area. So Dufresne, or Dufresne, either way, is how it's pronounced.
All right. So The Hauntings of Sugar Hill is coming out today. You can find it at Amazon. It's available through Kindle Unlimited as well. Check it out. Monica, thanks for being here. The next time you all see Monica, and she's going to be dressed almost exactly the same, and her hair is going to be the same, and I'm going to be looking the same because we're recording it right after this. We're going to be talking about the Desert Queen collection, which is the Egyptian series that you mentioned earlier.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve.